York City is the greatest city in the world. Culturally rich, ethnically diverse, it is a true melting pot where traditions and trends are created. People move here from all over the world to follow their dreams. From the tip of Staten Island to the top of the Bronx and everywhere in between, you will find entrepreneurs on every street corner. These are their New York stories.
My name is Mike Matthews. I founded and I'm the president of Electro-Harmonix. We're in Long Island City, part of New York City, and this is my New York story.
So Mike, I have to tell you that when we were doing research and looking for interesting stories, your story really caught my eye because of an article I'd read that had a photo of you and your business. And the first line, or the second line I think it was that in 1968, you were an IBM salesman. And so just that in general was fascinating. But I also thought, this guy, IBM salesman, he seems much better suited in the music business. Tell me your backstory. How did you go from there to here?
I guess it really started when I was 5 or 6 years old. I was always into business. I grew up in the Bronx. I was born in 1941. And I started out fishing balls out of the sewers, Spalding balls and selling them. Later on,
you were always entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I was always into business. And later on, there was a guy in the next building that made binoculars for World War II, and he had this huge stash of prisms and lenses. And so I bought all his stuff, and it became a big fad in junior high school. You know, all the students bought these prisms, and there'd be rainbows and colors all over the place. You know, in camp, when everybody went out to play golf, I was in the woods looking for golf balls I could sell. So.
Was your father an entrepreneur? Were your parents?
My mother really got me more on the entrepreneurial side. My father steered me when I graduated to pick a profession. I had to pick a profession. So I just picked a
proper job.
Yeah, I just picked electrical engineering, at Cornell, and then later on double registered and got a master's in business. But I was always into business.
And music or business?
Well, yeah, my
making
mother,
money,
business was always my thing.
Okay.
But in terms of music, my mother started giving me piano lessons when I was 6. A year later, I had a professional teacher. But then in high school, rock and roll was just becoming popular, and I started experimenting with some boogie woogie on the piano. And then I first got an electric piano, later a Hammond organ, and I was playing in that style. Also, I promoted a lot of rock and roll shows. I promoted the Isley Brothers, the Lovin' Spoonful, the Byrds, the Turtles.
Wait, when was this?
The Rascals.
While you were in school?
While I was in college, mostly in the summer, but during the year, I would bring them up, package them up to Cornell. They would play at some fraternities, some concerts.
The Isley Brothers, the Byrds.
But with the Isley Brothers, a lot of these bands, they travel just with a guitar player. And so the promoter would put together the band. And in those days, I was a real good keyboard player. So
Did you play with them?
I played with the Isley Brothers, put together the band. We had a great drummer that I got. But I was really good then. The Isley Brothers begged me to quit Cornell and go on the road with them. And I often wonder, because that was my groove, the early Isley Brothers with Twist and Shout.
Loved it.
And, how good I would have become as a keyboard player. But I decided quickly I wasn't going to quit school to go on the road with the Isley Brothers.
And so when you graduated...
I had 3 nice job offers. I took the job with IBM because I thought being in New York City would give me more opportunities for business. I knew I was always going to go into business.
So you have this incredible music background. You're promoting music. You're playing with extraordinary bands like the Isley Brothers. You're loving that. And Chuck Berry. And then you're on this road. You pick the road of IBM to be a salesman. How do you get to Electro-Harmonix?
Okay.
Where do we go here?
What happened was, while I was at IBM, I had an itch. I wanted to go back out and try to make it and play. So at that time I was married and my wife was conservative. And so I said, well, I got to make a little pile of money. In those days, when I started thinking about this.
This is the early 70s we're talking about?
This is around 1967. And IBM had these great schools out in Newark. And so I went to school, and at that time, the #1 hit was Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. And then I went back to school again 13 weeks later. Satisfaction was still number one. And all the guitar players wanted fuzz tones, you know. And Maestro, who made these fuzz tones, which was a division of a company that's now defunct, couldn't make them fast enough. So this service guy was making these fuzz tones one at a time. And he says, Mike, you know, come on in with me. We could build this much faster. I said, okay. So I went in, but then he didn't do anything, and I was left making his fuzz tone, and he just disappeared. I found this contract house in Long Island City. They would make a few hundred fuzz tones, and I don't remember how I met him, but the founder of Guild Guitars, Al Durange, and I you know, every couple of weeks I'd bring them out to Guilds, and they'd write me out a check, and then I'd go back to work at IBM. But now that Jimi Hendrix was hot, everybody wanted to sound like Jimi Hendrix. He could play a note, and the note could just sustain, go, ooh, a sweet, long sustain. So I wanted to develop a distortion-free sustainer. The problem in designing, especially in those days, you could sustain a note as it's dying out. You just build up the volume. The problem is when all of a sudden you play a new loud note, bang, you get this crashes and pops. It's how to get around that. So anyway, I went out there to try one of these, the prototype. In front of this sustainer was a little box plugged into it. I said, Bob, what's that box? Bob Meyer, the guy from Bell Labs. And he says, well, I didn't realize the guitar signal was so low, so I just built a one transistor preamp. So I wasn't a guitar player, but I had this guitar, I would pluck it and turn on the switch, and all of a sudden, the amp was loud. With this little preamp, the amp would get much louder, and then you turn it up even more, it would start to get it into overdrive.
So did you feel like at that minute, you were like in a moment that you
Yes.
were like at a you knew?
Yes.
Because I can tell by
Yes.
how you're talking about it.
That was the first
You knew this was it.
overdrive, and this little box, I said, I'm going to bring that out as a product. Only has one transistor, it's simple, and that ushered in the age of overdrive, and that was called a linear power booster. I called it the LPB1. We still sell them today.
And everything is manufactured here?
That was made in that I was at IBM. I started selling a mail order, but then the sales were growing, and I got my first place in Manhattan on 29th Street.
So you quit IBM now?
And then I quit IBM, yes.
And one thing that I'd love to get to is how you kind of crossed into working at IBM. I mean, I think we're starting to get there to when you started to really build your business.
Well, in 1968. October or November of 1968 was when I opened up Electro-Harmonix with $1,000. I built it fast. I was in a hurry. I mean, I wanted to build a scientific industrial empire and then invest the money into science and whip death itself. And whenever I had a problem, I was able to solve it. With that $1,000, I built it up to $5 million.
But when did it go from 1 to 5?
From 68 to 1980.
Wow.
But then in the early 80s, I had too many problems all at once, and I went bankrupt. And I was out of business.
And what was that like when you had to make the realization that you were going to go bankrupt? I mean, that must have been a devastating...
It's a terrible feeling, you just feel empty, and it's a horrible feeling. But now I feel great. It's nice not to worry at all about money. Having a pile of reserves, knowing that I could move on anything when it's right. So,
but you didn't always feel that way, and you weren't always in that position.
I changed when I went back in the business, and that's why now we're doing, over 30 million. I have plenty of cash, liquid, and we coming out with great products all the time. So, in 1979, we were selling a lot of product to the government of Hungary, musicians in Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia. One day in 1979 on my desk, I got a letter inviting me to exhibit at the first consumer trade show open to Western companies in Moscow. On the other side, I got no business in Russia. They didn't have any money. All these different government agencies wanted our stuff. So I started thinking, well, what can I buy from Russia? They need money. And my first idea was cheap integrated circuits, because as a manufacturer in the 70s, these cheap integrated circuits that would sell for 15, 20 cents a piece, which we call jelly beans, every couple of years, there'd be new series of integrated circuits invented. The companies that made the jelly beans stopped making them. The costs would go up to $1 or $2. Sometimes you couldn't find them. So I figured when those cycles hit, I could make a killing. But meanwhile, in 1988, I went over to Russia. In those days, everything is centrally controlled. So the Ministry of Electronics, to talk about expanding some of the IC business. You know, I started out selling them alone. My warehouse was my living room. But I saw hanging on the wall vacuum tubes. So I said, vacuum tubes, those are used in guitar amps. So I got some samples, took them out to a friend of mine named Jesse Oliver, who designed all the early Ampeg bass amps, and asked him, hey, are these tubes any good? He tested them, said, yeah, they're good. So I switched over into tubes. It was much easier because people in the industry knew me, and the vacuum tubes grew. You're looking around for the right thing, and that right thing turned out to be the vacuum tubes. But then when Russia completely collapsed, people were telling me, and I saw all the products, and I built tens of thousands, or maybe hundreds of thousands throughout the 70s, of pedals that I made in the 70s were selling for much more than what they sold for in the 70s. This new market, vintage market, developed. So I started out making the Big Muff in Russia. And so I was able to start small, where they did all the prep work.
How did you trust that it was going to be made to your specifications, the
Well,
same quality?
because
and then import. Had you ever imported?
Well, you do things step by step. You first get some samples, you test them out. You pay for 50 pieces and 500 pieces. Now we have a lot of the old designs and a lot of new designs. We make 130 different sound effect pedals. For years, the tubes was a bigger part of our business, but the last few years, the Electro-Harmonix pedals has overtaken that, and that's where our profits and most of our sales come from.
And you're direct-to-consumer dealer?
No, we only sell to dealers throughout the world.
How long do you give a product to sell, like before you decide to discontinue it?
We don't discontinue.
Never.
Most of our products keep selling, like I'm telling you with the Big Muff.
Huh.
And also, the production technique is very similar. So even if the sales go down, the gals, the technicians, they all know how to test and build different size lots. We keep a balance.
Is this what you're manufacturing downstairs?
Yeah.
Can we go see some? Can I
check
it out?
Yeah.
We're now in your warehouse.
This is the warehouse. This is where we manufacture the Electro-Harmonix pedals. And
It's huge.
Well, we make a lot of pedals. We have 120 pedals. We sell tens of thousands every single month. Here is a pedal. This is going to be hot.
Okay.
This is the Canyon. We have orders for thousands of these. We haven't shipped them yet. Wow. Basically, these chassis we make overseas, and they're printed. Then these printed circuit boards are also made overseas. See those printed circuit boards? And this is for all of our pedals. The gals, what they do is they assemble them together. They put them together, and that's it. Narcissa and all the gals here that are technicians working on the oscilloscopes, once the product is assembled, they test it on the oscilloscope. Once the products have been tested, then they have to be sealed.
Okay.
She puts on the knobs, and
Are they heavy?
I don't know.
No. But they're also very beautiful.
Well, we have.
I mean, graphically, they're very beautiful, I think.
We have a designer, Anthony Rubatola, and he's just a brilliant graphic
He does
artist.
a gorgeous.
Yeah.
Did he do Canyon too?
Yeah, he did the Canyon.
That's gorgeous.
Over here are all the products that have been sealed. But every single one of these is given another test. Each piece on this is tested with electric guitar.
Going into the sound room.
This is the guitar testing room. Here Nick is testing some deluxe memory boys and also some germanium Big Muffs using germanium transistors. Every single product is tested.
How many do you produce a day?
I don't know. You know,
I can't imagine.
Like, maybe 1,000. So they're packing now one of our really hot products, the soul food, and then she moves them into finished goods in our room where we ship.
So how do you get inspired? I mean, you're talking about a tool
I'm
of fuel.
inspired when a product is successful, whether it's a simple product or a complex, innovative, new digital product. I'm happy if it sells.
I'm going to give you a hug. Thank you, Mike. This was awesome.